Trillions of gallons have gone into lakes Michigan-Huron just in the last couple of weeks, from record rainfall throughout the month of April and also melting a record snowpack at the same exact time. Some areas were dumping the equivalent of 20 to 36 inches of rain into waterways and the Great Lakes over just a few weeks. So in this video, let's break it down. Let's have some fun with these numbers. How much water went into the Great Lakes, and let's put it into a perspective we can understand: more than 15.3 trillion gallons of water. Okay, so first things first, how much water exactly went into the Great Lakes? Well, we can tell because we know how much the water rose, because we keep track of that. We measure it. So just between early March and May 1st, Lakes Michigan-Huron, which are connected through the Straits of Mackinac, that's why it's one lake, rose about half of a meter, or about 19.7 inches. So cool, that's great, right? 19.7 inches, but what exactly does that mean? Well, now we have to start calculating volume. So we know the height, but what about the width and the depth? So we can actually calculate that because we know the surface area of Lakes Michigan-Huron is about 45,300 square miles. Now this is where the math starts to get really fun. So we want to keep this in terms that we can understand easily. Gallons, everyone knows gallons, right? So now we have to figure out, how many gallons is that? Well, we know for 1 square mile, which is a square, 1 mile by 1 mile, at 1 inch deep, is 17.4 million gallons of water. So now that we have our starting point, let's get into the more fun stuff. Okay, so now that we know it's 17.4 million gallons over 1 inch deep of water over 1 square mile, let's times that by 45,300 square miles. Now we're really getting into some big numbers. That is 788.22 billion gallons of water. And that's just for a 1 inch rise over those lakes. So we have to times it by 19.7, right? That's how many inches the water has risen. So now we are taking those billions of gallons, timesing them by almost 20, and we're getting 15.53 trillion gallons of water that went into the Great Lakes in just a few weeks. That's so much, it's really hard to comprehend. So let's try and make it even a little more understandable. Okay, so a lot of us know what Olympic-sized swimming pools are, right? We've watched the Summer Olympics. We've been to those really big pools with the swimming lanes in them. I used to be a swimmer, so I like this myself. Now, if we take that rough number of a little over 15 trillion gallons of water, divide that by the average gallons that are in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, which is about 660,000, we are getting 23,500 some odd thousand Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water that has gone into Lakes Michigan and Huron, again, in just like 7 weeks. Okay, don't worry. I know not everyone's a swimmer or can comprehend that even. So we all know jugs of milk, right? A gallon of milk, a gallon jug. So I was like, how many of these gallon jugs would it take to go to the moon? Well, if you stack those gallon jugs on top of each other, which by the way, they're about 10 inches tall, it would take 1.27 billion of them to reach the moon, assuming the moon is at an average distance from Earth. It does fluctuate a little bit, but for simplicity's sakes here, typically 1.27 billion gallon jugs stacked on top of each other would go from the ground all the way to the surface of the moon. Okay, but here's where the difference between billion and trillion is like just almost hard to comprehend, because we're talking trillions of gallons and it takes a little over 1 billion to go to the moon. So now we're talking about 12,000 columns of milk from the ground to the moon is how much water went into Lakes Michigan and Huron. Isn't that just incredible? That is absolutely incredible. So really fun ways to break this down. Really fun. Now, lastly, a lot of the shows I watched on the History and Discovery Channel as a kid always talked about how often things went around the equator. So 15 trillion gallon jugs going around the equator would go around the Earth 513 million times. That is so many gallons. That's a lot of gallons that went into the just Lakes Michigan and Huron. All right, so hopefully you had fun with that. Here again is just a recap of what I was talking about. We had record rainfall for many areas in the lower peninsula of Michigan, which of course runs into both Lake Michigan and Huron on either side of it. And we had a lot of snow melt, from some cases record snowpack. We had a late season blizzard drop over 30 inches of snow on northern lower Michigan. Now, we're not done dealing with this yet, because as of the time I'm recording this on May 5th, 2026, we still have flooding issues ongoing from high lake levels, high river levels, from all of this melting at once. There's still snow in the woods in the upper peninsula, even because of how much fell during the season. The Keweenaw Peninsula, the little part that sticks up into Lake Superior up there, one spot got 360 inches this season. That is over 900 centimeters for those of you following from a different country. So a lot of snow. What lake should I do next? What other math would you like to know? I would love to keep making these videos. Drop a suggestion in the comments.